Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I know my time is very precious, but I would like to yield some of my time to General Milley because I know that he had some comments that he wanted to make when Representative Gates was talking, as well as Mr. Waltz, about a similar subject of the stand down and race theory. Would you like a minute or so to comment on that? Do you remember what your line of questioning or thought was there?
Sure. First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military. And I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on that.
Thank you, General.
General Milley, you're portrayed in books published this summer as having sounded the alarm privately about the possibility of President Trump manufacturing a crisis involving the military, either domestically or overseas, in order to stay in office after January 20th. I'm wondering, would you now set the historical record straight, and were you concerned about the possibility of a coup, and on what basis was that concerned?
And Bob, thanks for the question. Look, I know there's a lot of interest out there on all of these books that are out there and quoting me and lots of others, et cetera. I'm not going to comment on what's in any of those books. Let me just say this, though. I always personally provided the best military professional advice to President Trump previously, to President Biden, or any other president. I always provide that best military advice to the Secretary of Defense, whomever is the Secretary of Defense, and I do that for the National Security Council as well. And I will speak also for this one time on behalf of the Joint Chiefs. The same applies to them. We always adhered to providing best professional military advice, bar none. It was candid, honest, in every single occasion. We did that all the time, every time. The other thing that I think is important to note here is that I, the other members of the Joint Chiefs, and all of us in uniform, we take an oath to a document, an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and not one time did we violate that. The entire time, from time of commissioning to today, I can say with certainty that every one of us maintained our oath of allegiance to that document, the Constitution, everything that's contained within it. And we also maintain the tradition of civilian control of the military. We did that without fail. And we also maintained the tradition of an apolitical military. We did that then, we do that now, and we will do that forever. All the time, Bob.
I'd just like to add a comment to that.
I know that there's some issues in the media that are of deep concern to many members on the committee. And with your permission, I'd like to address those for a minute or two. Again, I've submitted memoranda for the committee to take a look at.
You may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I've served this nation for 42 years. I've spent years in combat, and I've buried a lot of my troops who died while defending this country. My loyalty to this nation, its people, and the Constitution hasn't changed and will never change as long as I have a breath to give. My loyalty is absolute, and I will not turn my back on the fallen. With respect to the Chinese calls, I routinely communicated with my counterpart, General Lee, with the knowledge and coordination of civilian oversight. I am specifically directed to communicate with the Chinese by Department of Defense guidance, the policy dialogue system. These military-to-military communications at the highest level are critical to the security of the United States in order to deconflict military actions, manage crisis, and prevent war between great powers that are armed with the world's most deadliest weapons. The calls on 30 October and 8 January were coordinated before and after with Secretary Esper and Acting Secretary Miller's staffs and the interagency. The specific purpose of the October and January calls were generated by concerning intelligence, which caused us to believe the Chinese were worried about an attack on them by the United States. I am certain that President Trump did not intend to attack the Chinese, and it is my directed responsibility, and it was my directed responsibility by the Secretary to convey that intent to the Chinese. My task at that time was to de-escalate. My message again was consistent. Stay calm, steady, and de-escalate. We are not going to attack you. At Secretary of Defense Esper's direction, I made a call to General Lee on 30 October. 8 people sat in that call with me, and I read out the call within 30 minutes of the call ending. On 31 December, the Chinese requested another call with me. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia Pacific Policy helped coordinate my call, which was then scheduled for 8 January, and he made a preliminary call on 6 January. 11 people attended that call with me, and readouts of this call were distributed to the interagency that same day. Shortly after my call ended with General Lee, I personally informed both Secretary of State Pompeo and White House Chief of Staff Meadows about the call, among other topics. Soon after that, I attended a meeting with Acting Secretary Miller where I briefed him on the call. Later that same day, on 8 January, Speaker of the House Pelosi called me to inquire about the President's ability to launch nuclear weapons. I sought to assure her that nuclear launch is governed by a very specific and deliberate process. She was concerned and made various personal references characterizing the President. I explained to her that the President is the sole nuclear launch authority and he doesn't launch them alone, and that I am not qualified to determine the mental health of the President of the United States. There are processes, protocols, and procedures in place, and I repeatedly assured her that there is no chance of an illegal, unauthorized, or accidental launch. By presidential directive and Secretary of Defense directives, the chairman is part of the process to ensure the President is fully informed when determining the use of the world's deadliest weapons. By law, I am not in the chain of command, and I know that. However, by presidential directive and DoD instruction, I am in the chain of communication to fulfill my legal statutory role as the President's primary military advisor. After the Speaker Pelosi call, I convened a short meeting in my office with key members of my staff to refresh all of us on the procedures which we practice daily at the action officer level. Additionally, I immediately informed Acting Secretary of Defense Miller of Speaker Pelosi's phone call. At no time was I attempting to change or influence the process, usurp authority, or insert myself in the chain of command. But I am expected, I am required to give my advice and ensure that the President is fully informed on military matters. I am submitting for the record a more detailed and unclassified memoranda that I believe you all now have, although late. And I welcome a thorough walkthrough on every single one of these events. And I'd be happy in a classified session to talk in detail about the intelligence that drove these calls. I'm also happy to make available any email, phone logs, memoranda, witnesses, or anything else you need to understand these events. My oath is to support the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will never turn my back on that oath. I firmly believe in civilian control of the military as a bedrock principle essential to the health of this republic, and I'm committed to ensuring that the military stays clear of domestic politics. I look forward to your questions, and thank you, Chairman, for the extra time.
Thank you, General. General McKenzie, I understand you do not have a statement. Is that correct?
So I'll waive my
As the Taliban are in Kabul, they're worried that the longer they wait to get there to the secure airport, even if it means they wait there several days to get on a flight. So that's why there's this freneticism to get them through. And then also, if you could also address the question of should you have pushed harder when it was clear that this Taliban offensive was gaining momentum, a month ago down towards Kandahar and other places.
Well, like I said up front, there's going to be plenty of time for ARs. Right now, focus on the mission, focus on these people getting out, American citizens, the SIVs, others, Afghans at risk. And there's going to be plenty of time to talk about regrets and pushed harder and all these other kinds, intel assessment, et cetera. Plenty of time to do ARs. Right now is not that time.
Thanks, guys. We're going to have to go. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. General Milley, it's your testimony that you recommended 2,500 troops approximately stay in Afghanistan?
As I've said many times before this committee and other committees, I don't share my personal recommendations to the president, but I can tell you my personal opinion and my assessment if that's what you want.
Yes, please.
Yes, my assessment was back in the fall of 20, and it remained consistent throughout, that we should keep a steady state of 2,500, and it could bounce up to 3,500, maybe something like that, in order to move toward a negotiated, gated solution.
Did you ever present that assessment personally to President Biden?
I don't discuss exactly what my conversations are with the sitting president in the Oval Office, but I can tell you what my personal opinion was, and I'm always candid.
General McKenzie, do you share that assessment?
Senator, I do share that assessment.
Did you ever present that opinion personally to President Biden?
Again, I'm not going to be able to comment on those executive discussions.
Did General Miller ever present that opinion personally to President Biden?
I think it would be best to ask him. I believe that his opinion was well heard.
Secretary Austin, President Biden last month in an interview with George Stephanopoulos said that no military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence in Afghanistan. Is that true?
Senator Cotton, I believe that, well, first of all, I know the president to be an honest and forthright man. And secondly,
it's a simple question, Secretary Austin. He said no senior military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence behind. Is that true or not? Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
their input was received by the president and considered by the president for sure. In terms of what they specifically recommended, Senator, as they just said, they're not going to provide what they recommended in confidence.
I mean, it sounds to me, it's shocking to me. It sounds to me like maybe their best military advice was never presented personally to the President of the United States about such a highly consequential matter. Let me move on to another recommendation they are reported to have made. General Milley, Joe Biden has said that it was the unanimous recommendation of the Joint Chiefs that we not maintain a military presence beyond August 31st. We've heard testimony to that effect today as well. When was that unanimous recommendation sought and presented to the President?
You're talking about the 31 August?
Yes, the 31 August deadline for getting out of
on
here.
25 August, I was asked to make an assessment and provide best military advice on...
I'm sorry, my time is limited here. Okay. You gave me the answer that I needed to hear. August 25th?
Correct.
Kabul fell on August 15th.
That's correct.
You were not asked before August 25th? 16th.
On August 25th, I was asked to provide best military assessment as whether we should keep military forces past the 31st.
Secretary Austin, was anybody asked before August 25th if we should keep troops at the Kabul airport?
This is the president tasked us to provide an assessment on whether or not we should extend our presence beyond August 31st. And as General Milley just said, that assessment was made. We tasked him to make that assessment on the 25th, and he came back and provided his best military advice.
Secretary, Kabul fell on August 15th. It was clear that we had thousands of Americans. It was clear to members of this committee who were getting phone calls that we had thousands of Americans in Afghanistan behind Taliban lines on August 15th, and it took 10 days to ask these general officers if we should extend our president, I suspect the answer might be a little different if you were asking them 16 days out, not 5 days out. Again, my time is limited. I want to move on to another matter. President Biden's botched evacuation screwed things up coming and going as it relates to Afghan evacuees. We left behind thousands of Afghans who served alongside of us, who were vetted and approved to come here. We brought out thousands who really have no particular connection, about whom we know nothing, and cannot be effectively vetted. You now have female troops who have been assaulted. You have Afghan evacuees committing sex crimes at Fort McCoy. What are we to make of this? What steps are we taking to ensure that thousands of Afghans about whom we know nothing are not going to be a menace to our troops at our military bases and to the communities into which they're about to be released?
Well, Senator, I'm certainly aware of the allegations, and I take the allegations very seriously. And I can assure you that our commanders at our bases have what they need to be able to protect our troops and our families that work and live at those bases. And I'm in contact with General Van Herk, the NORTHCOM commander, who has overall responsibility for the operation on a routine basis. And this is an area that he remains cited on.
All right, I just got one final question. General Milley, I can only conclude that your advice about staying in Afghanistan was rejected. I'm shocked to learn that your advice wasn't sought until August 25th on staying past the August 31 deadline. I understand that you're the principal military advisor, that you advise, you don't decide, the president decides. But if all this is true, General Milley, why haven't you resigned?
Senator, as a senior military officer, resigning is a really serious thing, and it's a political act if I'm resigning in protest. My job is to provide advice. My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement. That's what the law is. The president doesn't have to agree with that advice. He doesn't have to make those decisions just because we're generals. And it would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. The principle of civilian control of the military is absolute. It's critical to this republic. In addition to that, just from a personal standpoint, you know, my dad didn't get a choice to resign at Iwo Jima, and those kids that are at Abbey Gate, they don't get a choice to resign. And I'm not going to turn my back on them. I'm not going to resign. They can't resign, so I'm not going to resign. There's no way. If the orders are illegal, we're in a different place. But if the orders are legal from civilian authority, I intend to carry them out.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator